Brilliant. So, good morning. We've just done a quick round of introductions. We're on day 3 of our Flourishing Fridays here in Stockport. We've been moving these dates around. What we try to do is condense some of our networking, peer support, learning and development into some specific days. We're running these on Mondays and Fridays at certain times of the month. Shelley's going to introduce the session shortly, but I just wanted to welcome everyone along. My name's Nickala. I'm one of the founders of Flourish Together, and it's great to see that we've got people from all over. We've got people from here in Stockport, obviously, where we're running the sessions here. These are with Flourish, a bit of backing from Business Growth Hub, and also some backing from the Sector 3 Proper Good group, and we'll hear a bit more about that later. We've got a few more of these running in the new year, so there's another 3 of these, January, February, March, that we'll pick up on later. And yeah, just glad to have people from Salford, from Rochdale, Oldham, anywhere I've forgotten, but yeah, we're a good group today, so looking forward to it. Do you want to introduce our theme, Shelley?
Sure. Hello everyone, and hello, good morning, welcome. So today we're going to be looking at corporate partnerships and cross-sector relationships, and we've got a panel here with a huge amount of experience in this area who will be telling us all about their experience and insights and ways that you can forge relationships, whether within the sector or across different sectors, in order to help grow your venture. So I will ask the panel to introduce themselves. Nickala's already introduced herself, so I'll pass you on to Beth.
Hi, my name's Beth Nunn. I'm founder and CEO of PI, Pursuing Individual Excellence. We are a social enterprise who are about to turn 5, and we support young people and women to become future ready through different programs and workshops that develop different skills areas, offer experiences and opportunities to work towards a brighter future.
Thanks, Lily.
Down. Hello, I'm Simone. I run a CIC social enterprise called the Goodness Collective in Stockport. I do a lot of coaching and consultancy around connecting communities, which is where the partnership work comes in. And I have also co-run a project with Beth around supporting women to make the most of those connections. So people who are furthest removed from being able to connect to the things that are happening locally. And pleased to be here today. Know everyone in the room, I think.
Finally got you on the panel.
I know. And I'll talk about Proper Good later. I also manage the support around Proper Good for Stockport.
Thank you. Good morning. Hello. It's lovely to be here and see all your lovely faces. There's lots of names that I recognise, which is amazing. Lots of names and people faces I've maybe seen on Zoom or heard about around and about. Which is really exciting. So it's lovely to see all of you in person. I am a director of a community interest company called the Collective Impact Agency. I just realised I missed our 3rd birthday, so we are now 3 and a bit.
We've got cake.
It was actually in May.
Get ready, people.
Reminds me, I need to do the year end accounts briefing. That's always fun, isn't it? So Collective Impact Agency is a community interest company. Our work is about helping organisations to collaborate and do things that scare them. Primarily with social enterprises and with local authorities, VC organisations, and I do lots of work mainly in the northeast at the moment for very boring reasons. I was supporting someone who was doing parental leave, and I just came in and then basically I just got sucked in. So yeah, lots of variety around the kinds of partnerships that I do. I'm also a member of the Campaign for Family Friendly Trains, which sounds a little bit like a non sequitur to my work, but is lots about challenging corporates to think differently about their passenger base and to basically stop focusing on communities and focus on people who have lives outside of work, which is fun and exciting. People are actually really on board with it, which is very exciting. It's just getting them to actually do something is the challenge. So that's me.
Well, thank you. I'll be passing it on in a second. So we're going to start by asking where to start, basically. So what would be your recommendations to somebody thinking about developing partnerships, and what preparation can they do in order to get ready to start having those conversations and start broaching those topics?
think there's a lot of fear around this stuff. I'm trying, it's been so long since I had to think about a question like that. I'm thinking, oh gosh, what happened? How did I first get into doing some of this stuff? And I think in order to develop collaborative partnerships, you've got to think, well, why bother? And I think there's a question on, on that coming up, and we'll come to that. But, what are the benefits? And there's multiple benefits. But if, working in your own sector, with the public sector, the private sector, voluntary and community sector, all of these different sort of terms, and then little kind of niche nuances, you've got to really work out it can be quite overwhelming, running or trying to set up a social enterprise. Is kind of, who do you need to talk to? Where do you start? And how do you not be scared to just go knock on doors? And I think getting started bit is working out who you're going to need to talk to, doing some really good sort of stakeholder mapping work, and helping maximize your time. So, because it's very easy at the start to just have all this networking stuff and go and talk to people, and you can waste an awful lot of time basically doing that. And so I think targeting what you need to do and working with people to help you take the fear out of it. Everybody, whoever they are, whether it's somebody out in the community, somebody at the head of an organisation, or somebody who's some big commission or budget holder, they're all human beings at the end of the day. So I think keeping that in mind, there's more I could say, but the other things. So I think being organised, working out ways to not waste your time, and not being scared, which is not an easy thing to do, but we can talk about how you've had to do that, because you're reminding yourself of that. The amazing services, the innovation and the expertise that you have, which is going to make these, strategic partnerships and these contacts that makes lives easier in the long run. So I'll hand on if hopefully that's helpful start.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of come at this in twofold. Firstly, in terms of collaborations that we've run with other organisations. So there's actually a number of people in the room here who I've run collaborations with in the past, and they've all come around quite naturally. So I think actually the idea of networking is really, really important, because you never know what's going to come from networking. So actually, I first met Simone at Flourish events, and a lot of the work that we've done over the last 3 years.
Flourish, that's
but I do genuinely feel like that, like in terms of, but it's also
we work very hard to make sure you don't waste your time.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like actually it's about picking, because I certainly know when I first found a pilot, I remember one International Women's Day, I went to about 5 events, and by the end of the day I'd got nothing out of anything and was just exhausted. So I since then have been really careful in terms of like what events I go to, but also the people I engage with. Like, I think it's really easy as a VCSE organisation to have people like, oh brilliant, they'll come and do something for free, and I think it's that kind of idea of being really transparent about, well, this is what we do. I sort of see all collaborations as transactional. So in terms of actually, so what am I going to do? Is this a partnership, or what are we doing for you and what are you doing for us, and vice versa? So I think that's really important to look at.
You're a super social and friendly person anyway.
Yeah, but I think like in terms of, I think
seeing us all as transactions really.
Yeah, no, I'm not. But I think it's just in terms of, and I think that's something, so like me and Nickala from Start Point, we were talking the other day about the fact that she wants some training around behaviour management and working with young people, and I want some work around, I can't remember what it was we were talking about now, but so we're just going to run training sessions for each other in terms of, we don't have the funding for it, but she's going to run one for me and I'm going to run one for her organisation. So, and it's that kind of thing. But all of our key collaboration partners, like the Goodness Collective, like Flourish, like Bounce Back Education, who we do work with, like Senko, who we do work with, like the Village Web Company, they've all come about quite naturally. It's not something that in terms of people who we actually run projects with, it's people we form positive relationships with. And I think if you're going to collaborate with people, that positive working relationship and that trust is really, really vital. In terms of collaborating with other organisations, so with councils, obviously we do a lot of work with schools. I think it's really key to make sure you're speaking to the right person. I've spent a lot of time wasting my time speaking to someone who hasn't got the authority to tick a box and say, yeah, like, oh yeah, that's great, I'll let you go and speak to 9,000 other people in school and I'll get back to you. And then you never hear from them again. But like in terms of, so now I'm very, very, it's like, right, okay, so who is it I'm speaking to? So, and that's grown from my own confidence as an entrepreneur. Like previously I would have been, okay, yeah, I'll come and speak to anyone about anything. But I think and that does come, and actually that is quite helpful sometimes. But if you want to do genuine collaborations, and also sometimes collaborations don't come straight away. So I know, like, some of the work we do with Stockport Council, we've had funding over the years, but we're now at the point where they're commissioning us for things. But that's come about after a lot, like, that's not just come about overnight. That's been 5 years in the making, and now that's starting to happen. And that has been about like just keeping touching base with people. And that's something else I'd say, like during COVID, quick emails, quick text messages, like, how are you doing, this, that, and the other. And all those relationships now are coming back around. So I think it's been, as Nickala said, it's been a little bit strategic about, if you're trying to form partnerships with people, who are you speaking to, why are you speaking to them?
Can I just go back? I think it's a really good point about making sure that you know that you're speaking to the right people. Do you have, like, what would be your tips for kind of filtering out the right people, filtering in the right ones?
Oh,
What questions might you be asking them?
I think in terms of just, I mean, it's about being brutally blunt with people sometimes as well. It's like, have you got a budget for this? Like, and I think that's, but something else we do is, I'm sorry, I've not got anything else, I just said do.
She told me up for that the other day. Just said
I think it's been recorded. Just realised.
Fine.
Sorry,
Give them a
internet. That's going to come back to haunt me. But just into, I've now completely forgotten what I was saying.
How you kind of
filter people out.
I
think in
the
terms of
questions that you might
so
very diplomatically ask to check who you're talking.
Because we work with schools, and I've got sort of a lot of experience of working with schools. I know who's going to be able to make that decision or not, so I make sure who I'm talking to is the right person. From my personal network, from my previous life as a teacher, from my professional network, there I've got knowledge, but I've also got a network of people who I can go to who are now assistant head teachers and things like that. But I also will look at someone's job title, and I will be like, well, actually, is it you I need to speak to? So I will ask those questions.
Doing some research, a little bit of research sometimes, and it just dawned on me as well, this transactional thing, I guess before we move on, is I do something similar, and we run a session on this that some people may have been to and others may not have, and we might look at it this afternoon, where if you were to draw 3 circles on a sheet of paper, you know, the interlinked circles, and you've got who's got power and influence, who's got money, and who's got a need. I tend to categorize by osmosis, like or by because I have to think about this, and when you think about who you're trying to talk to, who you're trying to find, the more people you've got in the middle there, there's a whole discussion to have around this, but you know, there's categorizing people in terms of things like power and influence, money and budget and need, as well as thinking about their role in the packing order of things. And you know, even if they've got the right role and the right budget and the right everything else, you know, have they got the time, the hours in the day, and or are they already working with 10 people like you, and you're just another hassle for them to have to deal with.
I think that's just, before I pass it to Simone, I think that's something as well, like with schools, we create quite a good model where, in terms of, if we sort of approach a new school, we'll go and approach them when we've got funding to run a project. If I'm ever going anywhere and running a project which is funded, I make schools sign a service level agreement which outlines to them the cost of the project, so that they're not thinking, oh, this is a free project. It's like, no, this is worth this much money and this is the funding we've got. Then often, if you're in school and you're proving yourself, or wherever you're working, you're proving yourself as someone who is funded, you're then more like, someone's seen what you can do, and they're more likely to come to you for them to then pay for your services as well. So that's definitely a model that we've used to enter new schools.
Thank you.
Just like
well, everything that they've just said. I mean, you're asking me about a subject that I could just speak to you about all day. This is what the thing that so I'm going to focus on the business relationships for my bit. And I think it's kind of rewinding you right back to before you start approaching, get really clear about what it is you're approaching people about. The amount of people who come to say, I want to meet this business, I want to meet that business. It's like, but why? What do you want to get from it? What do you see the relationship being like? Really get clear about what is it that I would like to get some support with from this business, and think about it like the transaction of the mutual benefit. You will have so much to give. You'll have so many things that you can offer in partnership with them. So it's also sometimes thinking about, what problem for them can I solve? If you do your research around who you're approaching, see if you're a good fit. Does their mission, vision, values, which they usually have spread all over their websites, they love a bit of that. Does it connect with what your ethos is? Does it fit with your aims? So for an example, if they are only really interested, they've said in their thing that they're interested in poverty and they want to do things like that, then approaching them with things around, so can you support our organisation with a food drive or sponsoring a breakfast club, thinking of Nickala's idea, it really fits with what they're trying to do. So if you're trying to get business support around your initiatives, really do your research before you go in blind. What else was going to, I've got a whole list here, so I might save some of it for the definitely networking, put yourself out there. I would say the thing with networking, the amount of people again who say to me, I want a list of who's in the room, so I set up something called Sector Connector in Stockport. Sorry, I feel like I'm ignoring you. I am here.
It's a brilliant one, that, and it's one we need to help get in many.
Yeah. So Sector Connector was an opportunity for businesses, voluntary community sector, and public sectors to come together to network around local problems. So it was very Stockport focused. I would like to do them in other areas, but the idea was actually just bringing people together in a room. I certainly know Beth's made some relationships with businesses through that, them getting to know you, telling the story. I think sometimes as a sector, we feel like we have to go with the begging bowl. It's like, what do we need from businesses? But like really having a conversation just about what you do, sharing with them your ambitions, and then them sharing back. You can see some crossover about how this might benefit us both, and do your research before you talk to them again about what that could look like, because you'll have ideas that they won't have even thought about. So for instance, laughter yoga, going, all businesses now are looking for ways to look at well-being differently. And they've tried bringing therapists in to do certain things, but not, I suppose well-being's got to be one of those areas where there's a variety of options for a variety of staff, and really being clear to them about the benefits to their staff and what that does to the rest of the business. So that there is a whole thing that if you look after your staff, you will retain them, and it's an absolute fortune these days to try and recruit new members. So show them the problems you're solving for them. Don't expect them to figure it out. You tell them, this is the problem we are solving for you.
Sometimes infiltrating lower down so that you've got allies in the company or business to get them to nag up top.
Can I ask a really basic question, please? This sector connector, how do we find out about things like that that are happening? That's a really naive
well, it's on a pause at the moment, so we've not run any for a few months. But literally, I suppose it's like, again, when you're looking at things like networking, finding out what's in your local area in terms of, so Stockport Local on the website. This obviously isn't relevant to everybody, but usually your council websites are a really good place to start. They will have, and sometimes there is a bit of digging around, they will have business pages about what they're doing to support local business. And if you are a social enterprise, I know you're not all, but you do fit into that business category. You are enterprising, you are making money, so you can do more of the good. So don't feel like you just have to network in the third sector. Yes, that's welcome and it's useful, but ultimately, if you're trying to run an enterprise, you need to be in business communities and understanding how they tick. So business pages on council websites, usually then alternatively to that, they usually have like a community and neighbourhood section. I know in Stockport we have local area something. I mean, they're not always the best designed. And in Stockport also you have Sector 3, who is the voluntary community sector. Their news bulletin that they send out is useful.
Sign up for, because I've looked for things like this and I found it so hard to navigate and find this sort of basic information. Look really naive.
So
from an arts
it's hard to
as well.
piece it all together, and I suppose this is where this is a network, isn't it? So coming to things like this, you'll find out about chinks of information that actually are not just landing on your doorstep. We've now got as well in Stockport Heaton's Post, Cheadle Post. I think they're starting a Bramhall Post. So community newspapers to support the voluntary community sector and the business community to put out their events. But it is a bit of a minefield. There is a lot going on. So it's just actually sometimes I need to spend a bit of time figuring out where these things are, because they're in every area. there are things, I know Salford has a great CVS, I get their bulletin as well. It's really useful. So yeah, just making sure that you ask around if you feel like you're disconnected from things. Feel like who are the champions locally who might know this stuff, and get a few pointers from them would be my suggestion.
I was going to say, and don't ever underestimate as well, like in terms of 1 or 2 key people can unlock a whole world of like opportunity. So for me, I'm based in Stockport. I like live in Stockport, and now I'm really proud about the amount of work that we do in Stockport. The first 2 years of us running, we didn't do any work in Stockport because just my networks initially were based elsewhere. And then it was a case of I just like a couple of people, one of them being Simone, another one being just a girl I knew at the gym, and basically opened up my whole network in Stockport, which to me has not only made an impact on me professionally, but personally as well. It's made me ensure that like where I live and work is my home, and I've got that community. And now just more and more and more stuff opens up. And I think don't underestimate those 1 or 2 key people. Look within your personal networks as well, because it's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me. Sometimes people are like, oh, I could like connect you to someone. And I think sometimes we don't, as women, we don't talk enough about, oh, this is what I'm doing, this is what I need from people.
Absolutely.
And I think like and I think putting stuff out, if you don't use Twitter, I think Twitter's a great way to find things out. So looking at hashtag like BTSE, so send like Stockport, like looking
Proper
at things
good.
like that. Proper good. Proper good. Yeah, can't say it. Like, but I think
You only
it's,
really need to follow a handful of kinds of characters that you've talked about, and they'll be sharing this information anyway.
Okay, so I've got to get a Twitter account.
Like, no, we can help you with that.
What about Musk? Oh my god.
I mean, I did think that the other day.
I think for me it's a story of 2 halves really, and on the so thinking about it in terms of my collective impact agency, I'm going to call it CIA for short. The acronym actually came before the actual name. It wasn't me, it's before I joined. In terms of the campaign for family friendly trains work, it is very much a transaction. I know exactly what I want from the companies who I'm sort of drawing into partnership, and it's not money. I want them to act. I want them to do specific things. Excuse me. And I can be extremely specific about what I want. I do find that one of the things that I have needed to prepare in order to develop those partnerships, and that's something I think about the rail industry, but also I think more broadly, is my own what's the word, intellectual capital, I suppose. I do find that in that particular arena where I'm having to say you need to do this because here are all of the reasons why, I need to not justify, I need to show that I know what I'm talking about. And part of that, I think, is because the rail
particular language or spin.
Yeah, there's lots of things that I feel like I need to be able to drop in. I need to know all of the stuff. I need to know a lot of the acronyms. I need to be able to say whenever I go and speak to a train company about, so you need to be putting space for prams on board because good reasons. I find I have to preemptively know things like, here are loads of examples on the continent of how the rail industry is completely focused around the full passenger sort of range instead of one really, really narrow focus. And I know that, and we recognise, we're masters of the art of the possible, mistresses of the art of the possible. I really hate it.
Mistresses,
yeah, it's
a bit risque.
Yeah, it tells you so much. There's so much about the English language that we need to start unpicking. That we know that there's a wider gauge on the railways in Europe, so we know that it's not necessarily good. So it's things like that, having that kind of intel when I'm in that particular sphere, that I feel like I need to have that in my back pocket in order to be able to make the influence that I need to have. Whereas when I'm doing my general work with the Collective Impact Agency, that's more about developing areas of work that are enormously varied. For me, it is partly about starting with knowing why you're partnering, why you're going to these people to try and develop a partnership, and thinking about what you want from it and what you can give to it. But for me, it's mainly about commonality of purpose. And two things, one of them sort of reflecting on something that Beth said. I from quite early on in taking on this job, considered my job to be to make friends, which sounds really weird and it sounds fluffy. It sounds sort of almost pointless in some kinds of ways. But I find that this is, but by going out and finding interesting people doing interesting stuff and getting to know them. And then, as Tina will tell you, I very much co-opted her as my friend through the EDI work that we did at Sector 3. But I find I look for interesting people doing interesting things and just look for those areas where we're passionate about the same kind of thing. And so starting with a relationship and working out from there, what are the ways in which we could work together? I don't go into these relationships with a view to what I want to get out of them necessarily. What I want to get out of them is interesting work that's going to help us to pay the bills, but will also sort of advance our collective aims to make good things happen in the world.
And you find people like that across all sectors. I know we like to think we're like experts at it in the voluntary community sector, because we kind of, you know, we have this autonomy to kind of, you know, lead beyond our authority, or we try to, but you know, we're not unique in that. And there are, like Simone, like within Sector Connector, where there's amazing people in every sector. You just got to find them.
And yeah, I was just going to say, and add on to it really as well. And I suppose if you, it's not the I scratch my back, you scratch mine sort of thing, but also have your ear to the ground for other people. If you're meeting organisations and there might be someone in the room who's not a great fit for you, or but you might really hear something that you think that'd fit Tina at Forward perfectly. Can I introduce you? Because you know that stuff that when I've supported other people, people will support you back. So if you're being their connector, you know, again, as a community of voluntary community, social enterprise, I don't know if there's any faith sector in the room, but we're all here to support each other. The best thing you can do is to network on each other's behalf and really like, oh, actually there's an opportunity for you over there. I'll just hook you up. And I've, you know, so much has come from that. I would say, yes, think about what you need, but also while you're out there, think about your rest of your community.
And I think as well as thinking what's important, I think it's that idea of, I think we talk about like friendships and like that, but it is important. Like you think about if anyone's worked previously, like in the public or private sector, or, you know, worked for someone else, it's your work colleagues. And actually, when I think about my career as a teacher, the success I had was largely because of the relationships I built with my work colleagues, both in and outside of a professional context. And I think that within this sector, certainly when we're running small organisations, often one-man bands, it's really lonely. And I think if you can make those relationships with other people, first of all, it can be fantastic for you to be developing and collaborating together, but it also builds you up personally and professionally, because you're suddenly creating this support network. So certainly like myself and Simone, I don't know what I'd have done through lockdown had I not been working with Simone at that point, like genuinely, financially and personally and emotionally, because we were running a project together, and therefore it gave us a focus, but it also made us checking on each other all the time. We brought Claire in more as well, and it was that, and actually it really was like my saving grace during the first lockdown. But then what that's also created is like we're great friends now as well, and it's that side of it. And I think seeing people as colleagues rather than collaborators as well, because essentially that's what we all are. We're all colleagues, we're all working towards the same thing, we're all trying to have an impact.
Thank you. It'd be just really interesting to hear now. I'll keep the computer up last time.
And we know there's some questions in the chat. We will get to those in a little while, so we've not forgotten you.
So just to hear about your thoughts on the differences between the sectors and what might be the benefits of working, say, within the VCSE sector, public sector, corporate sector, and then cross-sector partnerships. What are the kind of advantages?
I think it depends entirely on what you're looking to get out of it. Working in a previous life, working for an education charity, the kinds of relationships we build with corporates were very much about us coming to them as a charity, looking to draw on their corporate social responsibility, kind of thing, or looking for pro bono support with XYZ, looking for them to just give us stuff for free, basically. And that's okay. That's okay.
But it does create a bit of a hierarchy, doesn't it?
It does, and that's something that you either have to reconcile yourself with or work out a way of making it fit with who you are as a human being.
Mhm.
I think there can be some ethical dilemmas sometimes.
Diplomatically put.
I think there can be some ethical dilemmas. I think when you come up against the clash in values. So for me, a lot of it is about finding the commonality of values. I've got a colleague who's working on a really interesting policy review I've been supporting her with about digital inclusion. I say I've been supporting her with. She tells me all of the stuff. I help her to make sense of the document. And she was talking about how there's a role for corporates to improve digital inclusion, but that the success of those partnerships is dependent entirely on their motivations for being there. And if they're in it for the profit, they're not going to be focusing on the user groups and making all of let's say if they're an organization that generates platforms, then they're not necessarily in it for making sure that the platform is accessible to everybody. Their bottom line is the profit. And the question is, and this sort of speaks as well to my point about making friends. It can be quite a risky strategy to take. I'll talk probably later about our organizational principle, lead with generosity, which can potentially open you up to bad faith actors who might derail the things you're trying to achieve. But I think by sort of working from the heart, for me, is very important to my principles. And so looking to collaborate with all different areas of the sector, I just try and work with that same principle.
And you spot pretty quickly.
Yes.
Either from getting your fingers burned or through experience or just intuition, people that aren't going to align with that kind of way of
and I
working.
think that's something that's important to sort of tease out and understand when you're getting to it, because ultimately you don't partner with an organization any more than an organization invests in an organization. You're partnering with human beings, and human beings who come to the partnership with their own experiences and their own sort of ambitions, for the partnership and for themselves and for their business. And so being live to all of those things, I think, is at the absolute heart of any kind of partnership across any of the sectors. A lot of our CIA partnerships are with the VCSE sector. I convene a group in Gateshead that has control over a large sum of money from a very experimental funder called the Lankelly Chase Foundation. And we're a sort of convening of, technically there are 9 organisations represented on this team of 17, but everyone comes as an individual. Your responsibility is to be there as yourself and to bring your views, and yes, have what your organisation represents in your mind, but you're there to make decisions as yourself. Which means that people aren't sort of second guessing, like, oh, on behalf of my organisation, should I be saying this or should I be saying that? You're asking them to make decisions based on what they feel is right and good. And to me, that's really, really important. But that's all charities, social enterprise. Actually, there's a local authority in there and representatives from the funder themselves. But there's fairly sort of diverse representation of views, but just not that corporate angle. But I feel like if we did bring a corporate into that, the risk would be stronger, that we'd have to contend with that profit margin mindset.
I think it's really interesting. So for us, we've got sort of 2 sort of income. So we run projects in schools and colleges, and then we run community projects as well, that's been a bigger thing over the last few years since COVID. However, with schools, I think in certain sectors, for me to engage within the public sector, obviously I predominantly engage with schools and colleges. We do engage with local councils and things like that as well. But I know schools, and like that, and I think that's really important for me to be able to engage within that sector, to engage with schools. Something that schools really buy into with us is that we understand what it's like to be working in the school, and we understand the pressures of teachers and like senior leaders and things like that. So I think and we know the right language and we know and things like that. So I think if you are doing cross sector, I think it's really important to have, if you don't have an understanding of how they work and their language and their culture, to try and find out a little bit about it. So have you got someone on your board who, if going after corporate and corporate social responsibility, have you got someone on your board who can advise you about that? Because I don't know anything about the corporate world, so I would need someone else to advise me on that. But, and I think that's really important, if you are trying to do cross sector relationships, what do you know and where are your strengths, where's your knowledge? That is going to help make sure those partnerships are stronger. Schools will say to me, they will buy us in as an organisation rather than another organisation, because we are ex-teachers, like, and we are sort of, our school programmes are run by ex-teachers, so we go in and we get it. And actually, if kids are messing around, we'll just deal with it. We don't need like a member of staff and just things like that. But also, we understand that breaks happen, things happen. You go in and the computer doesn't work, because that's what happens in schools. But I think, and that's it for me, it's understanding the sector. Or if you don't understand, I think to start off with, is where's your knowledge, where's your network, and where's your expertise, because that's really important. But then also, if you need wider knowledge, who can help you get that, be it your board members, be it your friends, be it the people that you're engaging with. So like for me to start to understand the public sector, that's where Simone's going fantastically, because I never understood anything about like council and who to speak to, but I've had someone who's been my champion and my supporter there to help me to do that.
That's really good advice. Simone.
Lots of thoughts, but yeah, so I'm just thinking I'd like to pick up on what Nickala was saying about the power dynamic, because I think that is a big thing alluded to before with the begging bowl stuff. I think it's also around when you're doing cross-sector work, you really have to, yes, understand what you want and go in and ask for it, but also really value what you do and what you give, and don't make light of that. You know, if you can do that research that Beth's talked about and which I mentioned before, and really understand, you know, for instance, APS, which I'm going to do a bit of a plug here, APS group, printers in Stockport that don't really engage with the council, don't go to business networking things. But I just had a conversation one day with an individual lawyers, and they really don't shout about what they do, but they do like loads of great work. And I figured out like that they've got like loads of social value ambitions. So social value is the bit that about giving back, but they also do a lot of work with councils and national government as well. So in their contracts, they have to write in what they're doing to support their social value. So that could be taking on an apprentice, or it could be their environmental aims. The bigger the contract, the more stuff you've got to do, but it also is about supporting the voluntary community faith sector. So I understood what APS do, and their strapline is make more possible. I can really connect with that and say, okay, well, can you come on this dragon STEM type thing at a college, because, you know, making more possible is making more possible for the next generation. So I'm kind of giving their words back to them. It also just turns out that they do loads of massive printing, so it's really easy for them to print when I need them to. And they're all, I really got to know what they're trying to do, and they're all over social enterprises. They've got them written into their social value targets that they want to support so many social enterprises. So getting them to print our beautiful leaflets, colour as well, on shiny paper would have cost proper good a lot of money to get those done. So again, just kind of really making it easy for them. They do printing anyway. We're helping them to tick their obligations around social value. So for some people it is tick boxing, for other people they really want to do it. But recognise as well the value that you're bringing in terms of enabling them to get the contracts that they want to get. You know, that when we talk about the power dynamic, you're probably helping them to fulfill some of their things. Just get really clear. And when we said about networking, build a relationship. The amount of people, I alluded to this before and then went off track as I do, like want to see the networking list before they go in somewhere, because everyone wants to meet. So the very first sector connector we did, I think we had CDL there, and everyone wanted to meet CDL. Who's CDL? Yes, they're great and they do a lot of work, but they can't support every single organisation. Whereas if you'd have been sat next to Louise, who runs a nice little small business in Stockport, she would probably be able to help you. I think it's also keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be a massive corporate, and you don't have to be making mega relationships.
You're going to get a better outcome.
And we do find actually the SMEs, so when we've got this National Social Enterprise Day trail, it's all the small businesses who've said, oh, we'll do a 10% off voucher for the day, or even like Yellowhammer, who are in Underbanks, linked to where the light gets in, a baker's. They were like, well, we haven't got much to give you, but like their loaves of bread are like naturally baked and fresh, and all this stuff costs you about £5 a loaf, but they're gonna give us one as a price. So, but you know, you can't get anything out of the bigger chain in Stockport because of what Beth said, getting to speak to the people who can make the decisions. So don't underestimate sometimes in the crowd you need to speak to, because it's often not. Yes, it's great you can get in with them.
And often all the big ones
So many times,
and they've often managed to this year, and they won't do anything beyond that. Whereas, so for me, I often, one thing I was going to say for corporates, I don't really approach it. I do need to get some more into them. I always think there's some stuff I've got coming up. But in terms of one of the things we do, because we want to engage with local companies for career stuff for young people, so that's where I sort of try and tap into the corporate market. So again, it's different things. So just tell them. But again, there's something in that for them as well. And they've got staff who want to. Well, people got volunteer hours and all that kind of stuff. So it's.
Before Shelley gets on with another question, no doubt, I was just going to bring it back to kind of the why, remembering why is this important and why do we do this as social ventures, as people working in the world that we do. We're unlike lots of other businesses. I don't know, lots of businesses have to straddle sectors, but I think social enterprises have to straddle sectors because you're working in, you know, maybe health and the arts, or you're working with youth and employment, or you're working with, you know, you're already straddling a bunch of industries with what you're trying to do. But also we're change makers, and you're not going to get change doing what you've always done. And lots of sectors historically have a habit of, you know, just sticking to what they know or operating in the worlds that they operate in. And I think being able to do this cross-sector relationship building is what enables your projects, your ideas and your social ventures to be a success, and brings you multiple income generation options, and helps that social innovation that other people haven't been able to achieve yet happen. That's you know, that's why I think it's important. And you know, historically there haven't been enough, and there still aren't enough business support agencies and others who get cross-sector business support well. And I like to think that we do, just from the careers that we've had and the things that we've done, and the way that we understand that, you know, you're operating in a multi-sector world, just as little one man, one woman sort of bands. So as much as it might feel kind of overwhelming, oh, you know, even just doing some of this and making sure you've got relationships, or you've mapped where you might need to start talking to different kinds of public, private or voluntary sector people, or different industries that link to what you do, so that we're not just seen as, oh, well, you're a social enterprise, you're a charity, you're this. You are pushing your boundaries out into those either worlds of work that you've had, or the spaces that you need to get into. You know, really important to make a success of things. I think the only other bit that came into my head as we were chatting along here, and how do you do this, or where do you start, you know, what are the benefits? There are leadership and development organisations that have done this well. Some of you might have heard of things like Common Purpose, and anyone's ever heard of that? Or there are certain leadership programs that pop up from time to time that are all about developing cross-sector relationships, and so it's worth, we can talk about those things again, but there are a handful of agencies and organisations that get it and are actively trying to bring these sectors together to create change and have that common purpose and innovate in new ways, because if we stay where we are, we'll always do what we always do.
Thank you.
Sorry, am I on?
Please do. Yeah, I'm going to be running around getting on myself soon.
Tweet away. And so what would you say are the key ingredients to a good partnership? What makes it work? Once you've got something up and running, how do you keep it going well, Beth?
I do run behind
Because you're a teacher.
I think for me, I think it's got to be about trust, and it's got to be a two-way thing. It can't just be what are you doing for me and vice versa, and it's got to genuinely be a working partnership. I think if it's going to be too formal, you might need to legally put something in place in terms of what that is. But for me, it's about knowing what each other does and also understanding what each other's strengths and weaknesses are. So in terms of actually what can you do better in this and what can we do better? And I know I keep coming back to sort of obviously the collaborations that we've done with Simone and with Claire as well. So actually, like for our Wave of Change programme, there was really clear things that the three of us did because that was our strengths, and we played to our strengths. And Simone did all the recruiting and I did all the reporting, and that made everyone happy because I didn't want to do the recruiting and Simone didn't want to do the reporting. So it was just that kind of thing, but it was a two-way thing and actually figuring it out amongst yourselves. But also as well in terms of, like, for me, is that collaboration. It can help build your capacity. So actually, how can that help develop your business as well as just in the longer term as well? So actually, how is that developing both of supporting you individually, supporting you as an organisation, but also supporting you longer term? But for me, like, partnerships are about trust, being reliable. I think there's nothing worse than trying to run a partnership with somebody or trying to do a collaboration across sector or whatever, and someone just not getting.
And you can only work that out if you take baby steps.
Yeah.
Because if you jump all in with somebody and you've got no clue how they're going to operate, you can come across it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Certainly, if we are talking about working with local councils or big businesses and things,
before you
do something. Do something small, because I think it can be really difficult. Yeah, I think it can be.
Test and learn, my favourite phrase.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, if you're like, oh, brilliant, someone's going to give me like £20,000 to run this project, that's, oh, great, I'll do whatever they ask of me. But then if you've not, and also as well, like, set your stall out, set your expectations and set your limitations at the beginning as well, both with individuals but also with organisations. So don't be afraid to say, can we have that in writing? Can we have a contract? Can we have like a service level agreement? Where's my grant agreement? Where are the deadlines? And also then don't be afraid to push things a little bit as well. So if you've not got your money through and you're supposed to have had it, send an email. It doesn't matter who it is. It don't matter if it's a council or a big funder. If they've said you're going to have that funding and they're expecting you to start a project, you should have the money for it. And things like that. So just set out, I would say that for collaboration. It's also then if you've set things out at the beginning, no one's left frustrated or disappointed, and I think that's really important in terms of expectations, but that trust as well, and just collaborating with the right people.
Ingredients question, remind me what it was.
So what would be the key ingredients to a strong partnership? You're either setting it up or keeping it sustaining.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about, in terms of partnership, I'll go back to the businesses, because if you're covering more of the I suppose, again, in terms of partnership with a business, really thinking about not keep going back. That can be hard, because we've got some really great businesses in Stockport, we all know who they are, and they get asked for everything. So it's also about who else can we approach, and how can we get the businesses who are doing the good stuff, could name them one and all, again, the bigger businesses, and Music Magpie do quite a bit, APS mentioned. So rather than just constantly relying, how can we get them to support being champions to do more work like this and show the benefit? So I think there's something around being careful with our asks. I don't run to APS every time I want a bit of printing, because they get sick of me. It's like, actually something that
can choose.
Yeah, really, I again meets with their ambitions. So not over asking. As it's been alluded to before, that whole thing, what can I give back? So I always like to think about, some of you have been to my workshops, stuff like this all the time, the give and the gain. So it's like, what can I give, what can I gain? So also that whole, what's the reciprocal? If it's a partnership, it shouldn't, again, helps with the power dynamic, shouldn't just be us taking. What can we provide in return? And then again, I've said there'll be loads of things that you can do to support. Being really honest, and this goes back to the networking around saying, struggling a bit. Sometimes we don't want to say we're struggling or we really need, because it makes us feel inferior. But if people don't know what we're trying to do or what our ambitions are, then it's impossible for anyone to help us. And we don't have all the solutions. You only know what you know. So you might think you need one thing, but by having a conversation saying, these are my challenges, this is what I'm struggling with, get to know my organisation before we decide what the partnership looks like, they might have some really cool solutions for you that are nothing like what you thought they were. So I think, again, back to the building relationships, take time, don't rush in. If it's a desperate ask and it's obvious, then you know, yes. But if actually this is a longer term thing, I'd like to get to know you, I'd like to get to know you, like you to get to know me. Just take the time to do the relationship building.
I think that as well, just linking in with that, we've got a corporate construction company who we've actually been working with, like we've been trying to develop a relationship with them for a few years, and they've done things like a few years ago they did an Easter egg collection, so we then distributed those Easter eggs amongst our young people. And it's only taken now, and this also was in collaboration with another social enterprise, and I've linked Duncan in with them for a project that we're doing together, because he's the one doing the corporate relationship building for that project, and he's actually got, because he said he working with me and they know who we are, they're now going to fund one part of a project. That's taken about 3 years. It's been about 3 years since I had that and it is about, it's the same woman, so she's kind of known what we've been doing, but she has now in a position where, and also the thing that we've offered to them, there's clearly something in it for them as well. The program's called Build, which we're really clearly so with the consulting company. So, but it's that's come about now, and that wasn't there 3 years ago. So now it fits, and I think don't ever. It's building it like, and don't. It's those lukewarm relationships, and I think it's lukewarm. I don't like that phrase. I think
Warm leads.
Warm leads. Thank you. but it's not always even about a lead. It's about the fact that actually you've got a network. Just touch in with them every now and again, or send them like a Christmas card, or anything like that. And I think that kind of thing is really, really important to just keep, because you never know what's going to come up that might then work, or people might send you stuff as well if they know what you want to do. Yeah.
Giving you
Always win people over with Kate.
Yeah.
And what it might have actually
Ingredients.
It's cake ingredients.
Yeah.
Seamless.
For a strong partnership.
Ingredients for a strong partnership. I completely agree with Beth that trust is absolutely central. I think commonality of purpose as well. I think for a lot of I work at CIC. I said earlier, part of our purpose is to help organisations to do things that scare them. You can only really do that if you've built the depth of relationship that enables you to challenge them and to challenge their thinking, and to say, well, and to put yourself in the kinds of spaces with them mentally where they can say, well, I was thinking of doing this, and you can say, or how about we think about it in this way? Maybe you could do that. And sometimes they're a bit like, oh gosh, that's a bit, it's different. It's different to what they're expecting that you were going to say. But now I find that people bring me into spaces because they know I'm going to suggest something that's a little bit challenging, and that's kind of my MO, and it's also my value add to those partnerships. It's also quite a lot of the time why the partnership just evolves in the first place. And this links in with what I was going to say about our company principle, lead with generosity, which is where we try and secure our earned income funding sort of on an almost pay it forward kind of basis. So and we're able to we have the luxury of doing that through funding partnership that sort of began when the company was first set up. For the first year of my job, I had my funding secured for 12 months, and another colleague was sort of responsible for income generation for both of us. And so my job was just to go out, build connections with people, and say to people, what do you need help with? What are you looking to achieve? And trying to find how I could support them with that, and then we would build pieces of work together. And the net result of that is I did a lot of stuff for free. Which can be quite a risky place to put yourself in, because you don't want people to, if you'll pardon the expression, take the piss. But our experience as a company has been people buy into us as people. We build those depths of relationships that people and the connections between them, that we know that they're not going to do that, and they know that we're coming at it from the right place. And I now find, actually, we all now find people come to us. We don't bid for work. We don't actively go out and look for contracts to do stuff. I don't fill out applications for commissioned pieces of work unless there's been a whole other set of conversations that's already happened. So we kind of know it's going to happen anyway. And so I find that people come to us and say, like, we did this thing. I've secured a chunk of money, so can I please pay you to do the next thing? which it feels like a really nice, comfortable way to operate as a business, because you know that you're connecting. The sort of key ingredient of that partnership that you built is around trust, personal investment, and knowing one another.
And it takes years to achieve that.
It
I know we're working
does.
a very similar way. And on the one hand, I can say yes, no, I can scenarios where we've got that happening. But I think if you're trying to do things with people that scare them, you're always going to have to. You're always going to be wanting to go into new places and new ways and find new carrots and incentives and space creating opportunities to have conversation with the new people who is going to take another year or 2 or 3 to get to the point where they're like, can you willing to do more work with them?
Yeah, and that's
So
how you're
that
networking.
leads us very nicely on to my next question, which is all about, so we've talked about how to find the people, make sure you're not wasting time in research, and practical ways to make those approaches to, warm people up, build relationships, or get them to experience your organisation and the activities you run in a way that they're feeling what you do. So, and it'd be really great if you've got any specific examples of things that you've done that have reached out to people in that way.
So I think we run obviously careers events and things like that with young people, and we've got like a big hackathon. Not only hackathon, it's more design experience, design sprint day for young people in a few weeks, and we're inviting people along to come and like volunteer and support at that. And that's a really great way for people to come in and literally see what we do, because young people will be there taking part in the project that we run. And that's also a great way to engage with either the corporates or the public sector. And we will invite the funder along to that so they can come and physically see what's happening. But I think as well, in terms of engaging in a more positive way, like it's knowing about when the right time is to try and bridge the gap between a warm lead and a real sort of transactional sort of conversation. So I know in the first couple of years for me, I used to like do loads of like marketing emails and had teachers in the summer term, and I just didn't get anywhere because no one, if any of you ever worked in school, like, in the summer term, either you're still running around after exams or whatever, or by the time you get to July, you've just not got any headspace.
You've got to
whatsoever
know their
think about next.
seasonal variation and pressures of
Yeah.
the sector it is.
So that's what I've spent between September and October this year. That's what I spent a big chunk of our time doing. We've actually secured quite a few new contracts, because I also knew at that point, knowing the sector and just reading the room, actually what schools really struggling with is providing enrichment opportunities for young people post-COVID, because staff have not got the time or the capacity to do it. So we've changed our tact to do that. So I think it's just, again,
another time in the year, I'm thinking more generally for people that aren't in education, things like that, is clearly that January to March window, where it's an underspend period where people may or may not have pockets of money to test, try, do, flush out the door so they don't lose it.
I think videos as well of the stuff that you do. I know it's something that we've invested in for some of our stuff, because that's a really easy way to go, here you go, this is what we do. And I know it is something you have to invest in, which is difficult, particularly in the outset, but actually if you can show someone a video of like this, if people can physically see, and again, that then comes back to social media and Twitter, is if you can direct someone to your Twitter feed or to your Facebook or to your website, that literally showcases your work for you. So I think that's really, really important, because even if people can't physically come into and see what you're doing, that's the way to go. Have a look at our website, have a look at our latest blog, have a look at our newsletter. So
that's something that we can find quite challenging in the kind of work that we do at CIA, because the thing that people are buying from us is it's sort of is intellectual. So it's quite hard to show visually. So we put out some sort of thought leadership type stuff around social media, but an awful lot of the connections that we build are through our existing network. We get recommendations from other people, or people will speak to us and say, I really must put you in touch with this person. I do it to them, like for them. It's reciprocal. I was invited to speak at a conference in April of this year. And I went down, I wasn't paid for the talking bit, but everything else was paid for. And I went there because I was really interested in the topic of the conference, and I knew who was going to be there. And I also knew that there's going to be a whole bunch of other people there who I didn't know, but I think probably would be quite sort of interesting, people doing some really cool stuff. And sure enough, out of that, I made some really interesting connections just through being in that particular space. But also there was something about the position that I had as a person who had been asked to speak at that, which had come about because people had heard about the work that I've been doing from afar. So it's kind of this chain of events. I then went down to Oxford again to speak to the same people, plus some other people that I'd met at that event, who had heard the things that I said and said, that's really interesting, can we talk about it some more? It also in turn deepened relationships with other people who were in that room who I did already know. So it's sort of like this constant sort of cycle of people hearing your name and seeing you doing the stuff, and then recommending other people to you, recommending you to other people. I'm quite comfortable with being quite cheeky. If I know that someone knows someone, for example, I want to meet up with Andy Burnham at some point about the campaign for family-friendly trains, because he's absolutely kicking the arse out of Avanti at the moment, and so are we. And so it just makes sense. So I've realised my language is not good.
It's Friday. Yes. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse. Heard worse.
I would fill it up instantly. So I know someone who I think knows Andy Burns. So I just messaged her and just went, do you think you could do us an intro? She's like, oh yeah, I'm speaking to him next week. I'll just drop it into conversation. So you know people who know people. If you want to get in with them, then don't be afraid to just go out and say, could you do us an intro? Could you drop this information into their ear that's going to lead them in this place? And then if you really, really want to get hold of that particular person, there are a bunch of different ways that you can get them to hear about you. And your work sounds really manipulative, but I think is actually when you're really trying to achieve something, that's okay. I'm completely comfortable with that. And then more generally, when I'm looking to expand my network, again, finding interesting people doing interesting stuff, another approach that I take is simply to find the interesting people through recommendations from other people, and then just sending a message saying, I've heard really great things about you and your work, and I'm really interested just to hear more about what you do. And like, could we just have a coffee? Could we just have a chat? Maybe even just like a half an hour Zoom or something. And then it's like having a chemistry call. If anyone's had like a coach or a counsellor or something like that, they quite often do chemistry calls before you start. And you just sort of see if you gel, and you just sort of start to get this sense, like you get your spidey sense tingling, tells you this could actually turn into something.
Or this will not turn.
Or this will not turn into something.
Which I think is also just important to listen to as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you do get that sort of sense that something interesting could be happening, then obviously you then sort of like build out from there. But also you say to them, like, you've heard a bit about some of the things that I do, and sort of my way of thinking. Quite often I don't actually need to ask this question, but if I did, I then say, like, who else do you think that I should be speaking to? Like, who else do you think would be interested in my work, and vice versa? And people are usually like, reel off a bunch of names, and then you say, cool, could you do me an intro? And there you go. You're away, suddenly you've expanded your network even more with people who are along similar values lines.
And change makers across whatever sector are likely to do that. It does take up more time, and it does. Eats into your life, but it's part of kind of what we do. It's part of our DNA. The only quick thing I was going to add that hasn't been mentioned here yet, we think about partnerships, and then I'll get back to Shelley here because we'll have something else to ask, or we'll be nearly at time and questions and things. Is so I'm thinking of different partnerships we've got. So we've got, a really good partnership with NatWest that's rolled year on year. We've got a good partnership with Manchester City Council. Different partners and different stakeholders that we've got. Impact measurement does all form part of this sustained relationship stuff. There's all kinds of different kinds of partners, aren't there? But for the ones who are backing you, investing in you, or you want to continue that relationship, they're going to want to see some sort of evidence out of you. And I think being clear within that partnership, what's expected, what's realistic, what could actually be a better way of presenting or sharing, or you were talking there about, sometimes we do a lot of research and policy work, and it looks, reports, concept, and all of that is, how we're going to share that. But there are really creative ways of bringing sections of reports to life, making little gifts. So yeah, certainly I think some of our partners know that we're going to promote them and promote the work that we're doing quite effectively through social media in creative ways. We set out terms and parameters around when they're going to want information out of us, so we don't get these sort of out of the blue, or we try not to get these out of the blue requests for
3 days work at no notice of a piece of document that they want. So I think I agree with all of these things. There's loads more we could say on it, and we will this afternoon when we get into conversations, but thinking about what you can give them as evidence that what you're doing works, what you're doing through your partnership has worked, and as a sector and with the knowledge that we have and can give, if we're trained well or we buy in specialist people to do it for us, we can give much more quality and in-depth impact evaluations than any of their other partners can potentially do. So just something to bear in mind. And I have to just say, I'm mega sorry. I didn't mean to forget, because I was thinking in my head, we didn't do our 2-minute silence, so we might do that at the end for Remembrance Day. I've got Poppy. I'm like, no Poppy. But anyway, I'll get one.
Just moving back, just the last question. I'm sure you've got loads of examples, Simone, about creative ways of approaching or engaging people and building those warm leads. I'd love to hear those.
And I think my first was starting with a film, which I know you shouldn't do. But Beth and I were talking about this before, and I've had a lot of conversations like this. It's like, don't keep knocking on the same doors and expecting different results. You can waste an awful lot of energy, and particularly talking about councils as well here. And I hear so many people saying, oh, they don't know who I am, or they don't respect what I do. And it's like, well, in a way, you've got to kind of show them so that they can't avoid you. So the first part is redirect your energy. If you're doing the same thing all the time, it's that whole thing, keep doing the same thing, keep getting, what is it? Do
what you've always done, you always get the same.
So that would be a gentle challenge to yourself to check in with, actually, am I spreading my knocks here? Is it just like, if I keep going to the same place and I'm not hearing anything? And my other thing would be going back to that, is like shouting about it. We do a lot of times talk to our beneficiaries, so the people who are benefiting from our support, but we don't often talk to the people who have the budgets and have got the money. So, and I know as a sector we don't particularly love LinkedIn and Twitter, because I like Twitter, but it doesn't feel like our place and our people. But if those business people and public sector partners are on those platforms as well, and not hearing about the great work that you're doing and what you're involved in. I know sometimes it can feel a bit, oh, me, myself and I shouting, particularly if you're just mainly the person behind your organisation. But I switch that up by making it about the organisation rather than making it about me. So even though it is mainly me at the Goodness Collective, I always talk about the Goodness Collective. In fact, somebody said to me the other day, like, not done an intro post for ages. So I was like, right, I'll do one. So I've done one this week and it's had loads of engagement. So don't forget to really shout about your organisation, but it's okay to do the you bit in it as well, because often you are what makes that organisation if you're smaller. So again, some check-ins for yourself. Am I doing the right things? Am I talking enough about the good things that we're doing and the great work that's happening? Because that is all part of getting out there. And in the networking, do some different stuff. I think I met Louise, was it at the Kitchen Jelly? Do you go to them? No. Oh, right. So again, I can't remember where I met you, but sometimes I'll just go to random things, and it might feel like, I don't know what I'll get out of this, but I'll go anyway. And I've met some of the best people there, and have some great contacts through just doing something a bit different. Plus, it's a break from the routine. I get sick of working at the home office and always going to the same networks. So try some different things, challenge yourself once a month to do something out of your comfort zone, go somewhere you wouldn't go and meet some new people, and you'll figure out if it's something you want to return to. Yeah, that's my side.
Thank you.
I think as well, sorry, just to what Nickala was saying before about that measuring that impact and shouting about it. I think that's another thing, like at the start of any kind of partnership or relationship, have that really clear understanding of actually what you need from me to demonstrate that this has been effective, and what can you do for me to help demonstrate that's been effective as well.
And do that at touch points along the way when you create the partnership. So I got some of the early sponsorship of three organisations, CDL, APS, and I remember the third one is, it was when I first started up, but they supported me to get off the ground, and I used to like give them a bit of a quarterly touch point report, like bit of a visual, bit of a case study. This is what we've been doing. Thanks for supporting them. And don't forget to say thank you. That's a really big one. Tina and I have had these conversations about actually the amount of people who they get some benefit from a business or a collaborative relationship, and don't even say, oh, thanks for that introduction, or thanks for, it really means a lot. People will keep reintroducing it because they're getting something from it if you're getting the thanks. So that is actually a big one that I would really say that you think about the gratitude behind.
Yeah, really good thought. So so we've got about 15 minutes left. So I think what I'm going to do is have a quick chat about some potential pitfalls and how to avoid them. Then we'll take the questions from people at home, but also from around the room. And then this afternoon, we might look at some examples of good partnerships that have worked that you've been involved with, and sort of unpack them from start to finish and look at that journey so people can see the shape that they take in our roundtable discussions. So Jen, we'll come back to your questions in a sec and around the room as well. But it'd be just good to hear about any pitfalls that people should be aware of and things that you can do preemptively. I mean, we've touched on a couple of these, but other things that you can do to avoid falling into those traps.
Oh, there's all sorts of pitfalls to this stuff, isn't it? And I guess some of it's reading between the lines of, you know, going in with the right language and all of that sort of stuff, having the patience to deal with, to build the right sort of partnership to an particular outcome that's going to work, through to good question that Jen put here about, how is a collaboration different from a partnership? And I was thinking, well, it made me think that, some partnerships are more collaborative than others, so in my head, a partnership is potentially a more structured version of a collaborative project, or further developed, further established. That said, it's a bit about semantics, and that collaborative partnerships, sometimes they're more top down, sometimes they're more genuinely collaborative. And so you have to think about, what you want your role to be in. Sometimes a pitfall is you're a part of this. Something we talked about not enough here is partnerships can get rushed in the voluntary community sector, especially. Money comes out, a consortium's got to be formed, a response has got to be made, and people who either barely know each other, don't like each other, or are all clamouring after the same bit of money, are all pushed into forced into getting along. Those kinds of opportunities are to be avoided in theory. They never are, because they always happen. And actually those opportunities can force some really good ideas, some really good new collaborative partnerships, but and some really good solutions that you want to make happen anyway, whether you get the opportunity to be funded or not. But chasing after things and rushing forced partnerships. We've talked a lot here about organicness. So I think the pitfall is, if you don't try and do things built on trust, patience, time and organicness, they can
And
fall
I think
apart.
I see collaborations as being a bit loose. So it's like Beth, I probably collaborate with most people in this room, but Beth, Claire and I have a particular, but it doesn't mean we're working together all of the time. We'll have things and we might spot a pot of fun and say we could do this together, or there might be something. So I feel like collaborations for me are kind of a looser, we're always around and we're always supporting each other, whereas partnerships feels like quite a set thing about we're doing this in partnership together. So that would be my, but again, semantics, that would be my understanding of how they differ slightly.
And any other pitfalls or things that happen?
But I think we've probably mentioned a lot of them. Trust, expectations is a massive one. Might do it at the beginning. Really, and it can be really difficult to have conversations, particularly when you're talking money and about who's doing what and what the share is of work as well as resources. But it can save a load of hell later. Just if you can't be really honest with each other at the beginning, I would suggest it's probably not something to be entering into. You've got to be able to have that honest and challenging.
There's some partnerships that you're forced into, though, aren't they? And they're going to take much more time than you anticipated to smooth over some of these things. There are some people, there's a beauty in developing partnerships with people who are completely different to you, operate completely different to you, and have completely different networks to you. But ultimately, if the values aren't aligned, or some sort of communication or energy isn't aligned,
well, I suppose that's the thing
takes
as
more
well
time.
is about the pitfall. Is it's okay to say no, and it's okay to say this is not for me and I don't want to be, I love you all, but I don't want to be part of this partnership. It's not.
Or I can't stand you, and this is the nightmare. And I've got better things to do with my life and time.
Appreciate each other's work and
That was-
also be respectful that actually it's probably not a great
Yeah.
fit for us.
I think for me, just sort of looking at the complete flip side, when Nickala and Simone talk about that starting up and
I've got
I
a
think
story
it's
for you in a
I
minute,
think
which
it's-
is where
yeah,
you'll see.
I've
this.
got, and I think it's at the end as well, like, don't be afraid to say, do you know what, this has run its course and I need to walk away from this partnership now. And that's okay, because like, you know, being really metaphorical, it's like a relationship, you know, bad relationship.
But it
Relationships can be
depends.
great, but then they get to an end and they're not great anymore. You have to walk away for your sake and for the other person. I think with the collaboration, sometimes it can be a really positive and thing that can happen between you and that other organisation. And I can think of two particular things with schools, which I'll talk about afterwards, but I don't want to talk about recording on Zoom. But like in terms of that, actually those partnerships ended and those collaborations ended because it was one of the right things for me personally and also for Pi. And it was the best thing that we did. And I think having the strength, which does come from experience as well, that is a pitfall. If you try and drag out a collaboration for too long, it's not going to work. And even if it's been great before, it might not work anymore. It's not you, Samantha.
Conversations.
Yeah, having those honest conversations as well is very important.
I agree entirely on the sort of knowing when to call it a day.
Yeah.
I think is really important, and so much of it is about judgment call. When I was, I was going to say relatively new in post, but I've been there for a year, so not really new in post at all. I finally decided / agreed with a colleague that we were going to call it a day on an arrangement on a contract that we had. That wasn't like, we didn't have a formal contract written yet, so actually it was quite easy to sever it. We just say, well, you paid us for half the work, we're halfway through the work, like we're just going to stop now. But we were so close to the point. I just kept going like, but maybe they'll change, maybe they'll start thinking different. Again,
Goes the
it's like being
relationship
a bad
thing.
relationship.
Yeah.
Like, if I just stick it out a bit longer, you know, I can change them for the better. I could not change them for the better. And finally, my colleague, I could tell my colleagues just like sitting for months, just waiting for me to go, okay, I'm done with these people now. And we ended it amicably, because I like to end all relationships amicably. I don't do stuff, whatever the word is.
You've never
Thank
hired a
you.
hitman.
Thank you.
That was said very poignantly. That they're leaving, but you know.
There's scales of partnerships, I think, that can make it harder or easier to break up a collaboration. In that time, it was in that particular instance, it was quite easy. They were surprised that I was breaking. I do call it breaking up with them. They were surprised I was breaking up with them. They really shouldn't have been. That was the problem. I was going to break up with
This is
them.
not
The
new
fact that they were
information.
engaged. If they were more engaged, anyway. But then, you know, another collaboration is you know, a lot of you know, bigger organizations all trying to collaborate. Everyone's got competing interests. The important thing for me is finding those collaborations where people are in it for the same reasons and have the same motivations, and you can't control that. You can't control that. And sometimes you are going to come up against bad faith actors, and they will sometimes derail a partnership.
And it's not unusual that can happen in this power dynamic in the voluntary community sector, where people will just totally rip off your stuff, rip off your ideas. I know plenty of people who've had, and this is why sometimes we get a bit nervy about corporates, but it isn't just corporates that do this. You know, will make it look as though everything's ticking along and this, that, and the other, and then they'll soak up all of that learning that they've got from all of your planning meetings and say thanks but no thanks, and then set up exactly the same thing elsewhere. So you've got to, you know, fortunately, if you've got the brains and the innovation and the sort of design thinking that did that, you can do it time and time and time again. So you have to kind of not to worry too hard. There's things you can put in place around that, but I think you know, people do get the fingers burned.
I think one other pitfall I'm quite fortunate this hasn't happened for us, but I've seen it happen with other VCSE organisations, is that if you do form a collaboration or start working with somebody, that you can lose your sense of self in terms of who you are as an organisation. So actually, if it's a collaboration, first of all, whose like logo is on? That sounds like a really daft thing to say. Actually, who's his brand? Is it a collaboration? If it's a collaboration, are we going in for our way for change? We always have like both of our logo organisations, but actually, we had a whole brand for like that, just that project, and that was a much bigger thing than our organisations, and that was fine for both of us. But if if the 3 years that we were running it, if it's suddenly been the Goodness Collective, more like that, it would have been like, well, what's Pi's role in this and things like that. And I think we worked really hard to make sure that that was equal for everybody. And then I think in terms of,
when I had to send messages to Beth saying, "Bloody hell, send that post out and it's not tagged you, I'll do it in the comments." So
I made a little black book of all the times that someone did this.
It's also, isn't it, about I keep going back to the checking in with yourself, but checking in, are you doing your part the right way, not just expecting in terms of partnership everybody else to be. You also keep checking in with yourself about, am I doing things that I would want to be done back to me type.
And I think it's the idea of actually going back to that very early thing about that, actually what's in this for us as an organisation as well as you. So if you are involved in a big collaboration, which might be brilliant and a fantastic opportunity, that's great. If initially you are involved in that collaboration, that's opening up the doors for you. If then that then swallows you up as an organisation, you become a part just of the collaboration of their thing. Is that what's right for you? And is that what's right for you? It might be the right thing for you to then go and form a partnership or whatever, or just become part of that other organisation. But I think that often collaborations it's important to be, what's your role, what's your stake in it, and also what longer term, don't lose your sense of self as a person or as an organisation within a collaboration.
And on top of that, it's the addition of sometimes we need money, so we do things that we don't necessarily want to do. Not illegal. But it can be that thing of checking in with yourself again, and maybe this is I'm always checking in with myself, but it's like, is it changing what and sometimes it's okay to slightly change what you do, but if it's becoming I've become a whole other thing just to get this income stream, or just to get this funding, or just to have this partnership, it's unlikely to be the right thing for you to go. So it's always that thing of, is this partnership right for us as an organisation? Just because it's there and just because it has cash attached or kudos or whatever the thing is, does it fit with what we're trying to achieve?
Sometimes you have to be prepared to turn down money in order to stick with your principles. This is something that I was sort of grappling with this morning. Like there's an opportunity for us to get some money, but I think that the people who are trying to give us the money are doing it for the wrong reasons, and that doesn't sit well with me. So I'm not prepared to go down that route, even though it could do great things with that money
if you can change them.
I think as well, something that needs to know in a conversation about last week actually is sometimes it can be, this is a bit of a side, but like when it comes to funding and things like that, it can feel like, I need to apply for that fits in really well with, if it's not the right time, and I'm now like, I'm getting sort of more and more spiritual as I get older, but like if I've not got time to do it for an application, or things just stack up and I don't do it, I'm like, it's not meant to be then. And I think sometimes it's okay to not apply for everything, and if it doesn't work out to do an application, then just that's fine. Don't beat yourself up about the fact that I've not done that tender, I've not done that grant application, because if you've not had time to do it, if it was really important, you found the time to do it, and you've made it work.
You've got the capacity to
And you've got the
entertain that
capacity.
right
Exactly.
now, or even deliver what you're trying to apply.
Exactly. And I just think it's that idea of, and again, that could have been like a forced, because essentially talk about partnerships and funders, and that could be trying to force a partnership it's not meant to be. So I think it's that kind of, don't beat yourself up about
Just making the right use of your time.
Yeah, exactly.
We've come full circle right at the beginning. So I'm conscious of time, and we'd really like to hear if anyone has any questions for the panel. I know Jen's put some in.
And there's one, we've answered some, and then Jen's back this afternoon, so we can troubleshoot something she's thinking about then, I believe, but there might be others, so fire up any burning question for now, Jen.
And any questions from around the room?
There's a lot to digest, and it's Friday,
and we'll have a great
Early
opportunity. So this
lunchtime.
afternoon, so like I say, we'll unpack some real life case studies, and I think as well as looking at some good partnerships, it'd be quite nice to look at some nightmare ones as well. Obviously we don't have to mention any names, but it'll be good maybe to look at some of those as well and see what people have learned coming out of the horror shows that we will have experienced.
Learned or learning.
Yeah, exactly. So is there anything from Tina?
I think we probably know the answer to this, but how do you know when it's time to kind of stop knocking at someone's door, or stop trying, because like I'm still a baby in this.
You can put pause on. You can put a pause on. You have to. Sorry, you've got one. But I'm just thinking of examples of where that's happened.
Yeah.
You think because you're new and emerging, you're sort of wondering whether you're.
Because like I've already seen the benefit of being that yes woman, but at the time I was thinking doing way too much for nothing, and doing way too much that other people are saying I should be doing. It's giving too much time, but then it's like, hang on, mission landed in my lap from the council because I'd spent that time, and I was like, actually, I kind of should be doing this because I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm still building everything I've got.
It does take a lot more time to get the thing to land and people realise. So there's a lot more lost leader stuff that happens than you would realise. But I think if you know in your kind of gut really, sometimes you can.
It's making you feel shit. It's probably time for at least a pause.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Sometimes there are partnerships or people that you think should be wanting to work with you, and for whatever reason they just aren't. Sometimes it's time, busy, no budget. There's a bunch of other things. There's others, But I think if you pause on something or work on something else, if it's meant to be, they'll get back in touch with you. And quite often,
I have to say we're having nothing to do with you. It's just stop chasing them and just.
And again, the honest conversation again. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling about this. I would really like this partnership to work, but it feels like it's not a partnership. It's very one way. So I am going to pause until you come back with a response as to how you want us to proceed.
You also, I don't even know if you realise, said it then to me, you said something about what other people are saying we should be doing, or people saying other people saying who we should be working with. And again, this has come, I don't know if I'd have done that, like if I'd have said this like 3-4 years ago, but even my directors now like, oh, you should be speaking to this person. If I don't think it's right, I'm like, why? Because I don't think I should be. And don't be doing what other people tell you you should be doing. Do what you know, and you know in your heart, we're going back to that gut thing, and you know what's right for your organisation, but also for you personally. And I think what Simone said about making you feel shit, stop. I can put a pause on it, because there are other avenues as well. Like, and your work is amazing and fantastic, and there's so many things that you could be doing with people who value you, both in terms of financially and in terms of that support and that effective collaboration and partnership. And I think that you deserve, and know you do, to be in effective and worthwhile collaborations. So if you're not, even one that's not, then
it's a lot of work if you're not enjoying it and you're not seeing a really obvious benefit. It's not like we just turn it, sort of like go through the motion for a bit and then wander off. Like, I need to pair socks for a living. It's like you just turn up, you pair a few socks, you wander off. The work that you do, that's not just just do it for a couple of hours and then that's absolutely not the thing.
And sometimes it can help to time bound it in your own head and say, I'm doing this, I'm going to do it for 6 months because of these reasons, and to see whether we achieve this. And then you've got that end point, and it doesn't feel so relentless, but you're clear on what you're doing and what needs to happen for it to continue.
And if you're not in a partnership and you're trying to find the right ones, sometimes you have to go and shame them into it. So you have to kind of walk away or pause something and then go and do something with other people, other partners, show you're getting on with it anyway, or actually that project that we really wanted to do and it's not moved anywhere here, or in this geography, or with this budget, I've been able to make it work over here, and look at this and then bring them in at a later point.
And inevitably that person you're trying to form a positive relationship will see what you're doing and be like, we want in on that, and you'll be like, well, here I am, this is my stall, this is what you need to do to be a part of this.
This is out. She's going
She's gonna cost gonna cost you more.
Where I am with frustrations that I have with people that I actually now can't, I know I don't have to, but I kind of should be not partnering with, but working with, because of I've got the commission to run a network. It's these organisations.
Well, we can chat offline around these sorts of, we can troubleshoot some particular cases. I know
I mean,
I
do have support from you and from the council, in particular the network, but it's that kind of knowing. And I think also as women doing what we do, it takes twice as long to trust your gut as a human, as a woman, and as a fairly new social enterprise. So it's kind of
Yeah,
it's
it's normally quite.
I genuinely think that's the biggest thing that, and I think over the last year, I've learned to trust my gut, so in all areas of my life, because it's normally right. And I think that as we go through that, well, I think that like it's really difficult to learn to trust your gut. But the more I realise that when I trust my gut, everything is okay, and I'm right about my gut.
You still do your due diligence anyway,
Yeah.
don't you? You don't randomly just run into something.
I don't know, Claire. Like when I was like, that's basically what I did. I'm starting a company, things like that. It worked. 9 years later, and I trusted my gut.
I think that's something as well about external perspective to help you to sort of validate that, because I quite often I think that going back to what Simone said, like if it makes you feel shit, like for me, if I'm losing sleep over something, then it's telling me that something is wrong.
Yeah.
I've got a colleague who I've talked a fair bit with colleagues about knowing what each other's sort of stress indicators are. And so last Christmas I sat a colleague down. I said, can we have a conversation about this project that you're working on that I'm not working on? Because I think that it's putting you in a bad place. I can see that's sort of a benefit of being in an organisation where we're very small and we've invested a lot of time in having very close relationships with one another so that we can do some of that. And so I said to this colleague, I know that whenever he's really stressed or he's sort of on the road to being stressed, he starts having nosebleed. So if you just happen to mention a conversation, I had nosebleed this morning, like, okay, we need to change something. And he does the same. I've actually no idea what my stress indicators are for other people, like the external ones that other people can see. But for me, if I'm losing sleep, something needs to change, because you can't go on like that. And work is meant to be enjoyable. Like if we wanted to do work that was just purely transactional and you showed up and you did something mindless and you got paid and you went home, we wouldn't be setting up businesses. We wouldn't be working in social enterprise.
Absolutely. And we've got a question here from Jen, which is definitely worth raising. So Jen says, I'm also wondering about payments. How do you agree payments if you're collaborating with an organisation? Beth, we're talking about service level agreements.
Yeah, so in terms of payments, so for if we're running a project, so a lot of the times when we collaborate with people, we will put a funding bid together with that. Not always, but like, so for example, the Wave for Change program that we ran, and it was really clear from the outset, this is the work that we're all going to do, this is the money that everyone's going to get. So I think we make that really clear. If we're ever running a project that we are subcontracting someone for, like so to do like years ago, Shelley, when we sort of did stuff with you guys, it was a case of this is what we can give you and this is the work. So I'm really
set a day rate and things
I set like a lot of the time. So Sarah from Sasnesia at the moment for us is running sessions for a community magazine that we're running up in Woodley, and I've said to Sarah, this is what I want you to do. Well, a lot of the time it's saying the other way around. It's a case of this is how much money I've got for you, what can you do the other way around? And we set that out from the outset, and she was like, right, well, I can do this and this and the other, so we know right at the beginning.
Sometimes you know that going into it, you know, because there's a set budget for what you can tender for, there's a set fund, and even when there isn't, you know, you'll be co-designing what you're putting into that bid and what that budget's going to look like. Sometimes you end up having to lower your day rate or what you do to be part of a pilot in this way, or to learn something new, or to be part of this partnership, you know. And it's hard, you know, having to haggle with people who, you know, normally charge £100 more a day than you're going to be able to afford to pay them. But sometimes they will and sometimes they do, and if they can't, they won't.
Yeah, I think it's also in terms of like collaborations. So I'll just use Sarah again, like as an example. Like we use Sarah a lot for anything we need for photography or anything like that, and she also runs fantastic workshops for young people we work with. So she's done stuff in schools, she's done stuff like in communities, not kind of. Well, I'll be very honest. So I was like, look, this is how much money I've got, and I know that I would normally pay you more for it. This is how much. I'm just like, that's fine, because I know other times I'll be like, this is how much I've got, and I know that, like, so I thought so we work, and I think that's that longer term collaboration as well. And I think that again comes with time. But I think we set that out. I always make sure in terms of I send an email, like I don't do formal service level agreements when it's collaborations with people. I don't know if that's right or wrong.
It's a time thing.
It's a time thing, to be honest. I do them with schools because it's expectations, it's what we expect from schools, particularly when it's a funding thing, because I need them to know what they're getting out of it and what we need to get from it for our funders. But I always make sure it's in an email in terms of, this is what everyone's going to be doing, this is what the rate is, this is when we'll do payment and things like that. So I try and make sure it's on at least an email, because then if there is anything that comes up later on, you've got it in writing. And I do think that's really important to have things in writing.
And I think as the more you get your fingers burnt, the more you put the processes in to do this sort of stuff. You know, I've worked with people before where we've gone in for a particular bid, I'm due to do a certain element of work, and then, you know, they'll pull the rug, or, you know, various things. And sometimes you can swallow it and actually it was the best thing to do, or different things need to shift around. Other times it's, you know, it can be a difficulty. And I think whether it's by email, whether it's within certain agreements, or whether it's in something more contractual, you know, we've got some of the templates to put some of these things in place to help people look at that kind of thing.
I think a lot of it's also about confidence and in practice of doing it. I'm terrible at asking for money. But I also know what our day rate is, and I also know that it's okay to not charge the same price to different people.
Yeah.
You got to work within the
Sliding
confines of what
scale.
they can. Exactly.
But you
sliding
can't, if you
scale.
can't offset it. I've been working with a
Yeah.
group just lately who they've charged their membership all of this stuff, you know, and they've been paid to do certain things, and they want to offer them a discount if they've been on it before, but they've no way of subsidizing that. I know we're off piece here with that, but you know, it's the same principle. You can offer sliding scale if you're doing part of it in kind, or if somebody's paid you double so that you can offset that cost, or there's a fund or a contract over here that's subsidizing your whatever it is, time, materials and something else, so that you're not running something at a loss.
Yeah. If I can give an example, there's a piece of work that some people have asked us to do, asked my company to do, and me and my colleague were working out costs. We did a bit of sort of like market research, like what's the sort of equivalent cost for a similar sort of piece of work. And when we saw what private enterprises were charging for this kind of thing, we just balked at the cost. We looked and went, there's no way that this organisation is going to be able to afford that. And then my colleague priced it up according to our day rate, and we're like, well, that's sort of it's commensurate with what the private enterprises can afford. But we know from the value of the kind of work that we want to do with them, and our sort of like our sort of shared enterprise in this partnership is sort of, we need to be able to cover our costs. We need to be able to pay ourselves. We need to be able to pay the overheads of the company. We need to not go into liquidation. We need to be able to do all of the things that we want to do comfortably. But at the end of the day, our idea of what we wanted to be able to offer and then what we can afford to offer don't necessarily match up. And so I said, okay, I'm happy with us going to this organisation and saying, we can do all of those things, but it's going to cost you £92,000. I think they might say, I think it is actually technically within their budget, but they'll have other things they want to do. So I think it would be perfectly sort of like expected from my perspective, as for them to go, yeah, okay, well, actually, can you do it for less? And we say no, like we can do, like if you want to pay less than that, we're going to have to give you less.
Or you do a pick and mix proposal for people so they can see exactly how things are broken down, and they can choose what to take out based on priorities, potentially depends what the thing is, doesn't it?
And the brilliant thing is we're going to be running a session on pricing next year, so we'll sort of send details around that as soon as we've agreed on it. Right, I think we're going to wrap things up now because our panel keep vanishing. And it's good time. Too many teas and coffees beforehand. We'll be rejoining probably in about half an hour. We'll take a break for lunch. So if anyone at home would like to rejoin for the roundtable discussions this afternoon, then please do log on back onto the same link, and we'll have more in-depth discussions. Simone, do you want to add something?
Plug, just in case anyone.
Couple of plugs, yeah.
It is National Social Enterprise Day on the 17th. Of November in Stockport. We've got a whole day of activities, mostly free to attend. So if you think you would like to come to them, there's a list of what we're doing here, and there's a
QR code, because we're getting very digital these days, of how to book on. They're not all book on. And what I'd really like you to do before you go to help my social media, so I'm practicing what I preach and shouting about what we're doing. Claire's already had this yesterday. I would love whether you want to do it with a few people or
You get on the steps.
selfie
Get on the steps. We'll get a few.
steps, just so that we can really promote on social media the proper good day. But if you know anyone who can come along, we've got all the good stuff going on. We just need to fill the things now.
Right.
17th of November. It's on a Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Lovely. So I'm just going to stop recording, and yeah, do rejoin at home later
It'll
on.
be near 1, I would imagine, by the time we.
Yeah, so if you rejoin at 1, and we look forward to seeing you then, use the same link.
And